Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Technical Tim here, and I want to thank everyone so much who's been liking all my videos and subscribing to the channel, and I really appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up, or subscribe if you haven't already. And I have a few, it's been a while since I've done a video, so I'm going to give a few announcements. One, I'm wearing glasses because my contacts are out and I just put in another order. But also, actual announcements. I'm going to be sending out a few videos this week. I took like a week or two off just because I tried doing an Usman Colby preview with visuals, but it got flagged for copyright. So I have to do it without visuals. Sorry guys, sometimes the UFC are sticklers about that. I thought I was gonna be okay with the clips that I provided, but sometimes they're just inconsistent with the way they implement their copyright claims. So I thought it was totally fine, but whatever. But yeah, we have the DC card coming up. So I'm going to have a podcast with Gugabe on that whole card coming up. And I'm just kind of getting out some fights that, some videos like this one on fights that interest me for the rest of the year. And I've been talking about this one for a while. So I wanted to do kind of a singular video on it. So I'm going to talk about it now. And just in this video, this Colby and Usman video, know that this fight, I'm going to be mixing in technique as I go, but it's going to be heavily focused on stats and numbers just because I know some people don't like stats, but I think there's sometimes when stats don't work, but there's times when you absolutely have to at least consider it and know when to kind of adjust. And these guys win with output, whether it's output with strikes or output with wrestling. So it's really important to kind of see their overall stats and see if there's an edge for either guy. And I do think that if you look overall at the numbers, that these guys look very similar on paper, but I actually think Usman is, I think the numbers show that he's better. And I also think if you look at tape, I think Usman looks a little better as well. So please know that I'm going to be focusing heavily on the numbers in this matchup, and I'll be mixing in technique as well because I think it's important, obviously, to mix in both. And yes, I'm going to go along, and there's a lot going on in this fight, so please follow the best you can. I'm going to just kind of I'm going to be talking about 5 different topics in this fight. And so I'll kind of say the topic and then talk about that topic for a little bit and then move on to the next one to kind of make it less scramble-minded and easier to follow along. But I mean, the overall kind of theme I have on this fight is I think Usman is better everywhere. So if you don't want to listen to everything, I do think he's just statistically and stylistically a little better and a tough matchup for Colby. But let's get into it. So overall, if you look at their numbers, and I'm going to be pausing a lot throughout this video as well, just because I'm going to have to be looking up some numbers as well, so just bear with me. But if you look at their numbers, Usman, his significant strikes landed per minute are 4.2 and absorbed are 1.6. Colby's 3.9 and absorbed 2.35, so pretty similar, but it does look like Usman has a little bit of an edge there, but nothing major jumping out. Their takedown average, Colby is 5.69, Usman's 3.96, so Colby seems to land a little more takedowns, but I don't think that's a big issue here because Usman had a 5-round fight with Damian Maia where he didn't attempt a takedown, so obviously something like that's gonna skew his numbers. But if you look at when they fight similar opponents like RDA, they attempt similar takedown attempts and they land similar amount. Usman actually did a little better in the takedowns against RDA, but overall I think they're pretty similar in their takedown wrestling output. So it's really, in this matchup, it's looking at the effectiveness and what you think is going to happen on tape there and not really at their numbers, because when comparing against each other, that's when I think the wrestling, you can't just look at the numbers there. Their takedown accuracy is very similar, 51 and 50. Takedown defense, Colby's 78. He got taken down a little bit by RDA. That's where those takedowns come from. I think Dong Hyun Kim landed a couple too, but nothing major. RDA were legit takedowns. and Usman, his defense is 100%. So overall, their numbers look pretty similar. So you really have to kind of dive in and see how these numbers match up when they're kind of going against each other and kind of digging deeper into the numbers a little bit. So what I'm going to focus on is the overall attempted strikes. Like how many strikes do these guys really throw, especially in a 5-round fight, and does either guy have a significant advantage there? And before I get into that, sorry. The striking accuracy is like one of the key elements of this fight. Usman lands at 54, and it's because he's really effective at landing strikes in the clinch, which are higher percentage strikes. And Colby's 37. So like, if they're attempting a similar amount, just based on their striking accuracy alone, Usman's probably going to outland him. So that's why I'm kind of rolling into the first topic of their overall attempted strikes. I want to focus on their 5-round fights here, but it is funny because Colby actually hasn't... I mean, he's always been a high striking output guy for the most part, but he really didn't mix in high output until kind of his recent fights against Lawler and a little bit against RDA and kind of Maya as well. Where in previous fights with his grappling, like Wagner Silva, he only landed 23 significant strikes. So it's kind of recent where he's upped his volume a little bit. And in that RDA fight, Colby attempted around... let me pull it up. Of course, my internet's going down whenever I need it the most right now. Sorry, guys. So Colby attempted like 346 total strikes, and I'm focusing on total strikes right now, where Usman in that RDA fight and these are attempts, not strikes landed. Usman attempted about 334, so I think like they're both probably in similar tiers. And if you do look, and they made a big deal about it on the broadcast, Colby Covington attempted against Lawler something ridiculous. I think it was like 530 total strikes attempted, 541. So I think that was a UFC record. So he got a huge spike from his RDA fight, and it's mostly because if you look at those two fights, RDA actually puts up resistance and can mix in strikes himself, can stop takedowns a little easier, can threaten takedowns himself. So Colby's total attempted strikes obviously went down. But if you look against Lawler, he got to just tee off, and so he was obviously able to attempt way more strikes. But again, and then if you look at Usman versus Tyron Woodley in Usman's other 5-round fight, he got to attempt like 300 something ridiculous too. So I don't think from the attempted strike standpoint that these guys are going to be very different. I think they're both going to be attempting a lot, but I do think Usman, which we'll get to later, he's going to be landing more because he lands at a way higher clip. He lands at, what did I say? It's like 54%, where Colby is 37. So I think overall they're both going to be attempting a lot of a similar amount, but the thing is, it seems to be harder to land, to attempt strikes on Usman because he clinches you up so much. And so if you look, RDA was able to attempt 100 more strikes versus Colby than Usman. It's because Usman A was able to hold RDA down a little more, but Usman was able to control RDA positionally in the clinch more. So I actually think in this fight, I think Colby's not going to get as many attempted strikes off as he did against an RDA or a Lawler, because he's not going to be able to just dominate Usman in the clinch, and Colby just doesn't land as many strikes when he's in the clinch. Where Usman, I don't see anything in Colby's style to make Usman's number of attempted strikes go down. I think he's going to be at a similar, he's probably going to attempt well over 300 strikes again. And I think Colby's is going to go down. So I think the attempted strike advantage is actually probably in Usman's favor. It might be even, and in that case we'd still be okay because Usman lands at a way higher clip already. But if you look at their attempted strikes, I think it's probably advantage Usman, and that's going to be my theme throughout this video is that Usman just seems to have an advantage pretty much everywhere, in my opinion. And so then I want to see if I missed anything on the first topic, overall attempted strikes. But that's kind of my theme on that first one, is I think Usman will probably have an advantage there. And even if he doesn't, and they're at a similar amount, he lands at a way higher clip. But yeah, that's pretty much everything in that topic. So let's go to total strikes landed. I kind of already, that's my next topic, total strikes landed as opposed to attempted strikes. And in total strikes, I think, like I said, Usman just lands at a much higher clip, so I think he's going to have an advantage there. And then if you just really look throughout their fight career, Usman has never been outlanded in a round. And think of like how many rounds he's had in the UFC. I mean, he's had, what, 3, 6, 9... He's had 10 total fights in the UFC. 3 of those have been 5-rounders. And almost all the rest have been 3-rounders. He's never been outlanded. So that's so many rounds right there. I can't even do the math in my head. But he's never been outlanded except in 1 round against Emil Mech. He got outlanded by 2 total strikes. And in that was all Emil Mech landing strikes from the bottom. So it was kind of like meaningless strikes anyway. So he's basically never been outstruck in a round. Where Colby has been outstruck in the total strikes by Barberena in the overall fight, even though a lot of them were also kind of meaningless strikes in a way, where Barberena was just kind of tapping him when they were clenched up and stuff. But also RDA outstruck him in a couple rounds as well. So I think that's important to point out. And Colby just doesn't land at a very, very high rate. It's just at too much of a low rate. And then... yeah, so that's kind of like my total strikes landed, is just Usman doesn't really ever get outstruck. And there's nothing in Colby's game from a resistance standpoint that I think is going to lower the amount of strikes that Usman can land. I still think Usman's going to land around 200 strikes, and I think Colby will probably be around 100 or something. But I'll get into that a little more. But I really want to differentiate this RDA fight and this Usman, that Usman and Colby had. And I think this fight is super, super important because RDA, stylistically, is kind of a wrestle boxer. And there's going to be resistance in the wrestle boxing because RDA is well-rounded everywhere. So I think it's a good fight to compare. And if you look, Usman outlanded RDA in total strikes, 227 to 84. So by just so much. And if you look at Colby and RDA, it was 142 to 130. So Colby landed 80 less strikes, and he also got landed on 50 more times. So that was pretty much a dead even fight, RDA and Colby. I do think Colby won that fight because he kind of won the position battle up against the cage. But as far as total strikes, it was pretty much dead even. And Usman and RDA wasn't even close. I think that's kind of important to point out. And the total strikes landed it's just Usman. I still think he's going to land around 200 on Colby. I don't see anything in Colby's game to really make Usman not be able to land, because Usman is always landing from distance. He's always landing in the clinch, and he's landing when he's on top of you. Where Colby isn't like that. He actually got outlanded in the clinch by RDA by 20 significant strikes, where Usman dominated RDA in the clinch, and Usman lands so many strikes in the clinch. So even if they're clinched up, I think that's going to be a point where Usman will be able to land and Colby really won't be able to. So I just think Usman's going to be landing more strikes, and I think Colby's going to land. And if he lands 100 total strikes, that's still quite a bit. It's just Usman's going to rack him up much higher, in my opinion. Let me look if I have any other points to make on that. And sorry, I'm trying my best to keep this organized, but I think you guys get the point so far. I think their attempted strikes is pretty similar, and I edge Usman there. And then their strikes landed, I edge Usman there because he lands at a higher percentage. And if you even just look at that RDA fight, Usman just doesn't get hit as much from a total strike perspective because he just dominates in the clinch. So if you look at distance strikes, let's think about that, because I originally thought that Colby probably had an advantage at distance. I honestly thought that, and a lot of people are saying that online. And then whenever I started taping, I didn't really think that anymore. I watched Usman against RDA, and watched him against, who was it, Warley Alves, and he was fucking dominant from a distance strikes point of view. And if you look at Colby, he is good there, but I think a lot of people are thinking that because he just dominated Lawler. And I think that fight against Lawler, you're allowed to just tee off against him. If you look at Lawler's last two fights, man, RDA pretty much had the exact same performance from a total strike perspective as Colby did, except Colby was able to attempt more strikes, but from a strike landed point of view, RDA landed 172 significant strikes, while Colby landed... Hold on one second. Internet's giving me some issues. Where Colby landed 179 significant strikes. And what's crazy to me is, before that Lawler fight, the odds between Usman and Colby were around minus 300, which is where I thought Usman should be. After that fight, now Usman's in the minus 150 to 75, minus 175 range. So there was a 15% decline in the implied odds. And I don't get why. It's because I picked Colby to win that fight against Lawler, and he pretty much had the same performance as RDA did. RDA has never landed more strikes in a fight than he did against Lawler. He was kind of able to land at will, and Lawler just sits up against the fence, and you can kind of do what you want to him. And I just hate to say it, but Lawler's not very good anymore, and he absorbs a ton of strikes, and Colby pretty much had the performance that RDA had. So, imagine if Usman fought Lawler, it would look super fucking dominant as well. And so I don't think that fight showed an improvement in Covington's overall distance striking game. I think it's more of Lawler being shot than it was Colby making a leap, because RDA did the same thing pretty much against Lawler. So, but from the distance strikes, I thought people were overrating Colby from a distance strikes point of view because of that Lawler fight, because he really did the same thing RDA did. And then if you look, Colby and RDA and Usman and RDA, their distance strikes were actually, Colby landed more, but it's because the fight was there. But from a percentage standpoint, Usman actually did, I think it was like 8%, like an 8% ratio better than Usman, or better than Colby did. So he kind of just dominated there. And Colby did well too, but then Usman dominated in the clinch in the other areas. And I actually think Usman is better from distance. And a lot of the strikes Colby lands from distance are kicks. And I think kicks aren't counted as amongst the judges as much too. So I think Usman's going to have advantage from distance. And I already touched in the clinch. I really think from a positional point of view and from a striking point of view, Usman's better there as well. And that kind of segues into the grappling a little bit, just because in the clinch, I think Usman's just way better from a positional point of view. If you look against RDA, RDA was actually able to find an exit to the left and right against Colby, and whenever Usman and RDA were clinched up, fucking RDA couldn't move, man. And it's funny because I think Colby can compete in almost every area, but he's still going to be losing in every area, I think. And whenever you kind of combine it all, it's just all advantage Usman, in my opinion. And in the grappling, I think Usman has the way better hips, and Colby, he let RDA way too deep in on his hips, and if he does that to Usman, Usman's going to get like a slam takedown if you let him that deep in on his hips. And I think he'll be able to take Colby down, and his top control is better, in my point of view. And Colby just he has trouble holding people down. I don't think he can hold Usman down, and Usman if you look, whenever RDA shot in on Usman hit that switch, he's going to be impossible to hold down, in my opinion. And Colby, the against RDA decided to go for takedowns in round 4 and 5, and he had in the 10 minutes about 2 minutes and 40 seconds of top control. So that makes me think Usman will actually be able to get some grappling going in here as well and mix in takedowns. And I think he's the better wrestler overall. So to sum everything up is, I just think from a total strike perspective, Usman's going to be landing more and he's going to be getting hit less. And I think even from distance, Usman's actually better. And the numbers show it. I'm not diving too deep into those, but I talked a little bit about it with RDA in their matchup against him. And that Colby, I think his distance striking got a little overrated against Lawler because he was allowed to just tee off. And then from the clinch and when it comes to strikes and positionally, I think Usman's just a little. And then if you look at the just overall wrestling, I think Usman's better as well. So, and the thing is, guys, I love Colby. I played Colby in his last like 4 fights. I've been playing Usman as well. Usman against Woodley was my biggest bet ever, actually. And like, I like Colby. I have no hate towards Colby. It's just I don't think this matchup is good for him. And then if you also look at the cardio, so originally I wasn't really sure who had better cardio. I thought maybe they just both had really good cardio. Neither guy would slow down. But if you look in round 4 and 5, Usman had way more success against RDA than Colby did statistically. Those were 2 basic 10-8 rounds for Usman. He outlanded. He was able to get his grappling going, and he outlanded RDA like 90 and 80 to 10 or something. Like, he just dominated. Where in round 4 and 5 with Colby and Usman, the total strikes were really similar. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Usman statistically broke RDA, where Colby wasn't able to do that. So I also give the cardio advantage to Usman as well. And then if you just kind of look from optics with Maia and Colby, Maia was able to, he was kind of keeping up with Colby, but still losing in the first round and a half. And Colby was actually getting a little tired in that fight. If you go watch round 2, he was getting a little tired, but then Maia completely gassed out and Colby was able to pour it on him. But I just kind of saw with my own eyes, and not really from a numbers point of view, that Colby was slowing down a little bit versus Maia as well. And it wasn't until Maia broke that he was able to really go off on him. And then Usman just doesn't do that. Just his best rounds are always his rounds 3 to 5. He just breaks everybody. And he did it to RDA, and Colby and RDA, they're pretty much in similar tiers of cardio in that fight statistically. And then a few little X factors that I think could come into play. This isn't very scientific, but Colby has been cut in multiple fights. RDA, Maia, he got cut badly, and Usman has never been cut in a fight that I know of. I was kind of going through that. May not matter, but I do think cuts matter from an optics point of view for the judges. Especially just, I don't know, especially if it's a close round. And so I think that's kind of advantage Usman as well. And then if you really look, I'm trying to think out loud. Like, I think Colby can compete. Like, I expect him to be able to compete for a little bit, but he's just not at an advantage everywhere. And he tends to land, especially his leg kicks, he tends to land his strikes when he has you moving backwards, and it's really hard to push Usman back. And I feel like if Colby starts to push Usman back, which I think both of them will be pushing each other back at various points of the fight, but I think Usman will just clinch up with him, where if Usman's pushing Colby back, and Maia was able to push Colby back at times, and so was RDA, and no one's been able to do it to Usman. But I think that will lower Colby's overall his striking totals as well, if he's getting pushed, if he's not the one going forward, because you kind of, like I said, he lands a lot of kicks for his significant strikes, and if he is going backwards, it's a lot harder to land leg kicks as well. And, yeah, but I do want to say, like, the way I see this fight going, like, after all that, sorry if you weren't able to follow along there. But overall, the way I see this fight going is I expect it to be competitive for maybe a round and a half or so, or maybe even 2, but I don't think Colby can just clearly win any rounds. Like, Usman just doesn't get outstruck in rounds ever. And then I think Usman's really just going to kind of take over, and he's way bigger. He's got a 4-inch height advantage, or 4-inch reach advantage, and then he also is a little taller as well. So even just the physicality stats are in Usman's favor, and he's a lot bigger, and I just feel like if they're clinching up, the size is going to really matter as well. So I'm kind of just throwing everything at you guys right now. But I just really see him having a huge advantage. I see him having a huge advantage because he's at an advantage everywhere. So it's just going to add up and accumulate, in my opinion. But, yeah, like he's just going to... Like, I think the first couple rounds might be competitive, but it will never be a clear Colby round. And then Usman also hits harder as well. And if you look, I think Usman has underrated power. Like, even though he has only 1 knockout, he's hurt Warlley Alves, he's hurt Tyron Woodley, he's actually stunned people before. And Colby has been hit a little bit before. Like, he has a good chin, but you can tell he has taken some big shots before, and they've seemed to affect him a little bit, but nothing like too crazy. But Usman seems to have an awesome chin, and Colby's never really hurt anyone, at least in his kind of recent fights that I've been really paying attention to. So I think power advantage goes to Usman as well. So, yeah, but I do want to say, after saying all that, I'm not maxing Usman. I'm going to play just a few units on him, and the reason why I'm not maxing him, at least for now, I'd have to think about it more, is because even in Usman's fight versus RDA, if you watch that fight, it was a fucking slaughter. Just if you're watching it or if you look at the numbers, pretty much every round. And the first rounds weren't as big of slaughters as rounds 3 through 5, especially 4 and 5. But still, one judge, like an idiot, gave it only 48-47 Usman. And this is a fight that's likely to go to the cards. I think it's probably going to go to the cards, although I do think Usman could maybe knock out Colby. But it's likely to go to the cards, so you have to kind of just you have to mitigate risk a little bit, just because you can have some judges go rogue, and I do expect maybe a competitive round or 2 for a bit. So that's why I wouldn't max this and still be a little careful. But it's funny, because I thought that fight with RDA and Usman was 50-43. Like, I thought Usman won every round. And I thought round 4 and 5 were a 10-8, and one judge gave it 50-43, and then one judge gave 48-47. So you still have to be careful. But overall, I just think Usman is going to win. I think he's at an advantage everywhere where the numbers come into play, in my opinion. And then whenever you look at the wrestling, even though, like, statistically neither guy is at a huge advantage, they both just kind of dominate everyone with wrestling. I think Usman is just going to be better there and a little too strong as well. So that's my overall opinion. I'm sure I missed some points that I wanted to make in here, just because I'm kind of throwing everything at the wall and kind of letting you guys run with it. But I see this video as me giving you guys information, and you guys can kind of make your own decision. But I do think Usman should win this fight. So thank you so much. Bye.